When you read the Hebrew text of the Bible, you find a lot of interesting and weird things. For example, there are words that only appear in the text once, and we're not entirely sure what all of them mean. Strange verbs get used and then glossed over in translations in order to make it clear, readable, understandable. For example, Eve actually bought Cain. That's awkward. A word will pop up and it'll come back in a slightly different context, and we're still not entirely sure what it means. But these are topics for other episodes. Today, I want to look at a couple of examples of titles that are often translated as names. In Hebrew, kind of like in English, the definite article, only gets used for titles and general nouns. In English, it sounds like the teacher, the student, the elephant, the dog, the episode. We don't use it with a name. You wouldn't say, I went to the movie with the Caroline. People look at you funny, like you're a weirdo. The same thing happens in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the definite article is ha, and it's attached to the beginning of a word. It's never a separate word on its own like the, but we do translate it that way. So knowing that, a strange thing starts to emerge. In Genesis, Adam is arguably never a name. It's a person, but it's often translated as a name. The word itself can mean man, person, mankind. When it's translated with the negative, it's no one. It's translated in a lot of ways, but it's always a very general word. In Hebrew, as in English, for the time being anyway, the default gender is masculine. If you don't know or you don't care about what gender the person or the thing is, you use the male pronoun. For example, if I talk about a person and I don't know if it's a man or a woman, I might say he. Perfectly acceptable in English. The same is true in Hebrew. We don't always know that the person is masculine. Usually it's clear from context, but sometimes it's not. This is another case where language matters. We tend to think of Adam as male because of the masculine default in Hebrew. So this person, called Ha-Adam, is not necessarily a man. In fact, it isn't a man. It's actually inaccurate to call it male. But we kind of have to sometimes because, again, within the language, we talk about a man, a person, mankind, etc. I'll give you an example from Genesis 2, which is really different from Genesis 1. I'm translating directly from the Hebrew, so it's not going to be as clean and clear as the one in front of you, but it will be more accurate, if a little more awkward. Sorry. In Genesis 2:5, before there was all the bush of the field in the land, and before all the grass of the field was sprouting, because Yahweh Elohim caused no rain over the land, and there was no one there to serve the dirt. The one is Adam. There was no person. Later in 2:7, and going on through the Hebrew text, Adam is not actually a name, but refers to, more accurately, the person, Ha-Adam. So in Genesis 2:7, Yahweh Elohim formed the dust person from the dirt and breathed into his nostrils a breath of lives, and the person had a living soul. Throughout Genesis 1 and 2, that thing the deity created is called Ha-Adam, the person. It's not until we get to Genesis 5:1 that we get Adam in a form that could be a name, and it's still not clearly a name. It could easily be argued that it's just peoplehood, mankind, a person. Within the verse, Adam is easily translated as humankind, both times that it's used. The NRSV chooses to translate the word as Adam one time and mankind in the other. I would argue in favor of not changing the translation. It works perfectly fine as mankind in both places. Again, I'm going to translate directly from the Hebrew, so this is more literal. So 5:1 reads, "This is the scroll of the generations of humankind. On the day Elohim created humankind, Elohim created them in her likeness." You know where else this happens? In Job. We find in Job another title that actually gets translated as a name. Now, Job is a really complicated book for reasons that I don't have time to go into here. But the guy we call Satan in Job is actually not his name. It's actually a title. He's actually referred to throughout Job as Ha-Satan. It shows up several times in the book. We often think of Satan as the opposite of our ideal of God and what we think God is. The root of this title, actually, is the verb accusation. The role is simply one of being an adversary, the other side, for lack of a better term, the devil's advocate. Keep in mind, without this character, the book of Job would not exist. It's a lot of thought-provoking material and raises a lot of questions. Remember, I'm not a theologian. I'm not really here to give you an answer to this. I don't know what the answer is. My goal here is to reveal some of the depth and complexities of this text, to raise some questions for you, to give you something to think about directly from the text. Never be afraid of asking. And never let an answer stand if it's not meaningful and satisfying. Until next week, have a good one.